5783. And, it's an amazing thing, really, if you're here in Eretz Israel. And if you're not, I hope you can appreciate that it is so quiet right now everywhere. Especially, I'm in a community in a village, on a mountainside, but it is more quiet now than it is Erev Shabbat, Erev Yom Tov. There's a sense of real drawing within. Quiet that's in the hills, it's in the sky, on the earth. And that quiet has a premonition built into it about things to be, things to happen, that we might not want to look forward to. Tisha B'Av, of course, is the morning of the lost temple. And the Zohar Chadash has a perush on Lamentations, the great book from Yirmiyahu, the prophet. And the Zohar's commentary teaches us an amazing thing. And I hope this goes in where it needs to go in, because it will help us to understand God's relationship to us and to humanity. It begins by telling us that when the Jewish people, before they sinned, before the destruction of the temple was decreed, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, would rest on their head. And then God would rule over the world for their sake. In other words, it's not simply that God makes you a divinely inspired person. He changes the entire spiritual atmosphere around the Jewish people, around the nation, around the land. The whole world changes because he's investing his presence upon the human race. There's it's called Sukkot Shalom, is one of the metaphors, the Sukkah of peace, the tabernacle of peace. There's a force field of goodness around us. But the Zohar goes on, of course, to tell us that when Am Yisrael falls, and the various ways that human beings can fall, that divine presence is removed. And then the net result is that we feel powerless. We feel weak. We feel far from Hashem. The relationship is distant. That feeling of presence, of comfort, of certitude, confidence in your relationship with this all-protective being. And there's a lack of leadership. One of the signs of the absence of the Shekhinah is the absence of leadership. Now, leadership can look a lot of different ways. Depends on where you live. It could be a lack of rabbinical leadership. It can be a lack of political leadership. It could be a lack of military leadership. And it goes on and on. We could say it through, the rest of the disciplines, the endeavors of the human race, that there's leaders in business and leaders in art and leaders in all kinds of fields. But when there's a lack of leadership, you know it. You can sense that. And that's because we've sinned, and that's because the divine presence has distanced itself from us. Well, the Zohar comes along and tells us that God mourns us. God doesn't just sit back and run the rest of the universe. He's only got 100 billion galaxies to deal with. Who knows what other forms and entities there are to deal with out there. Some hold, in the Kabbalah, some hold that their extraterrestrial life is not a necessity, because God created the world to have a relationship with a being of free choice and not just created beings that run around like robots. And other people say, no, there can be other life in other places, because that's how big the universe really is, and that's how big infinity is, and eternity. But regardless of that question, we don't need to answer that today, whether or not there are extraterrestrial beings. It's not our main focus. But the focus here is that God is mourning us. And he's mourning his pulling away from us. See, if you break up with somebody, even if you want to break up, you're the person who wants to break up. It still hurts. You still miss them. You still have memories of the good times. But at a certain point, you have to pull away for all the reasons that we all know. So God pulled away from the Jewish people at the time of the destruction of the temple. And it says, Man yelechem, the Zohar says, what will be with them? Now, God's all-powerful, all-knowing. He knows the past, present, and future all is one long movie. He knows what's going to be with them, but of course, it's a rhetorical question expressing the sense of loss. B'chol tzaratam, lo tsar. In all their sufferings, it is a tsar, a difficulty. In all the Jewish struggle, it's also a struggle for God. And you say, well, how could God struggle? He's perfect. No, because he's not. That statement doesn't come from a God-centered perspective. It comes from a human-centered perspective. God is looking at the world through us. He's total empathy. He is able to leave his frame and enter our frame. V'chal tzaratam, and all their sufferings, lo tzara, it's a suffering for him as well. So you see, Hashem has that ability that we need as enlightened human beings to be able to step out of our shoes and step into somebody else's and to experience their experience and to be able to process that in a way that helps them. So when we talk about the shift from a godly to a human perspective, it's not that God stops being God. He simply is able to shift into our position and to mourn the loss of his relationship to us because he had to pull away because of sin. And the loss of the Beit HaMikdash, was he mourning stone and golden vessels and marble floors? Was that what he was mourning? Maybe it was the millions of people that died or sent into exile. He was feeling their pain as well. Now, a lot of people have a problem, I think, with this idea that God feels human pain. But if he didn't, he wouldn't be God. And so we can extrapolate, we can pull out of that idea that we're here to mourn the destruction of the temple, the destruction of a building. But of course, it's not just that from our perspective either, but the building is a symbol of a relationship. The building is a symbol of a presence. And we're mourning the loss of the presence in ourselves, in our minds, our hearts, and in each other, and in our communities, and ultimately in our institutions, whether they're religious or political or legal, whatever chair you sit in, that's your center. And if you sit on the Supreme Court, well, it's a pretty big chair to sit in. But Hashem is there. B'chol tzaratam lo tzar. He's going to feel that pain. Think about it, it's like, why people also ask me, well, why does he make it this way? He's so infinite and perfect and eternal. Why does he have to make it this way? That there has to be this suffering, that there has to be even free choice. Why does free choice have to be structured based on reward and punishment? Abundance and lack. And we say, well, that free choice enables us to have the capacity to become godlike. Because only a free being, truly free, can be godlike. And if we're to make it known to the world that we're created in his image, we have to have that possibility of failure, of fall, of lack, of loss. And yet still mashlim, as they say in Hebrew, and still become whole with it, and still embrace the contradiction, embrace the loss, with an idea that this is not the end of the story. And certainly the destruction of the second temple was not the end of the story. But why does God do it that way? I hear the cry in my head because I feel people's pain. Like as if, well, okay, one time I said to somebody, well, are you prepared to leave if you don't like the world so much? No, I didn't say that, right? Suddenly you get a little more real. When you think about leaving this game, this planet, this human experiment. However, you never notice when your kids play? Some of you, I'm sure, have marveled at your children when they play. I know I do. And it's very interesting. You ever try to interfere when they're playing? No, don't do it. Because if you do, they'll tell you, Abba, Saba, we're playing. It's our game. You see, the children don't want us to interfere in their game, in their experience. And God doesn't want to interfere in our experience because he can override the system at any moment and he can change destiny at will. But if he did it just at will, without the long-range picture of what it's supposed to be and how the human race is supposed to expand and evolve and become greater than we've ever been, he can't override the system. He can't jump in the game. Abba, we're just human children trying to play this game. And so when we understand that in a deep way, we also can understand the necessity for God's distance to give us free choice, the sense of the distance, because that's where we build our strength with him. If it was easy, it wouldn't be built. We wouldn't grow up. We'd be 70-year-old little guys running around having a good time, chasing the newest toy. And that's not really why we're here, why we were created. So the Zohar goes on to teach us that after the destruction of the temple, God was the one singing the verses of Eicha. God was the one singing about the loss of the city and the widow at the end of the road and all the tragedies that took place. And so when he is engaged at that level of loss, we can almost feel his loss of our loss. And we see that there's a union and that we can gain power even in mourning and even in loss. Now, the building itself, as we said, is a symbol of a relationship. It's a symbol of God's presence in man's life. And when God has to leave, can you imagine you tell your best friend, you have to go now? You have to leave Jerusalem. You can't stay here because there's too much sin, because the Romans are taking over and doing all these evil things. And the divine presence pulls away. Our loss is God's loss. And his perfection doesn't preclude that, it includes that. And so what we're hoping for in rebuilding the temple, it's not world domination, it's not spiritual significance, I wanted to say, but the idea that we're the best, or the highest, or the most evolved, or all these kind of ideas. The idea of the third temple is that we fix the relationship, that this temple is going to last, that humanity has evolved, that the Jewish people have arrived, where we're not going to fall into those mistakes of the past, and we're going to rebuild the temple, not to lord it over other people, but to invite other people. Come join us. See what it's like to have the world purified, to have ourselves purified. You know, they say when Esav was the twin brother of Jacob, and he'd heard the news that his grandfather Abraham died, and he was in deep mourning, because, you know, it's always easier to love your grandfather than your father. I guess most of you probably know what I mean. But Esav, they said that he was terrified of doing tshuva because he didn't know who he would be without his vices. He didn't know what love was like without lust. He didn't know what money was like without greed. He didn't know power was like without bloodshed. And that's why his curse that he will live and die by the sword. What does it mean to live by the sword? It means you make your living from war. You sell more weapons, you get richer. You make a living from war, you live by war, and, well, usually if people that live by war will die by war, because that's part of the divine reflection, the measure for measure way that God runs each and every life. So when the Romans came and they destroyed the temple, they were only living according to their own creed. And it wasn't a small group of people. And the Romans had a lot of other dealing in the world and all the different places of their empire. We were just one story. But everybody knew that if you have Jerusalem, then you're the real spiritual master. That if you're the king of Jerusalem, like Melchizedek, who was Shem, the son of Noah, the people looked up to you. Because this land is a difficult land. And this place is the center of human history. And as we live out history today, tomorrow, the next days, and we're back to praying and back to living our everyday lives, I think it's a blessing to be able to mourn our losses, and it's also a blessing to be able to mourn other people's losses. But we're not going into sadness about it. We're being able to feel pain, elevate the pain, and move on. And that is part of the whole Jewish message, that we've gone through this exile for a reason, to show ourselves and to become stronger and to show the world what it means like to have a God, one omnipotent, perfect being, always with us because we have this relationship. And the third temple is going to be the crown on a new relationship and a new intimacy with God, where the rabbis teach God's name, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, will become Yud and Hey and Yud and Hey. It will be a reflective name. The first two letters will reflect the second two letters. And it will be as if that God will be like our brother, and no longer this ancient father, high in the sky, far away, but our brother, close, tight, one with, trusting. And we should all have brothers and sisters like that, and we should be able to see everyone else like that. And we should be able to see the infinite creator like that, because he wants that. And we're here for that. So it's going to happen. And when it happens, I don't want to be one of those people that I told you so. Because we've been telling the world, I told you so, for thousands of years. And it doesn't really change anybody. I told you so. It makes you feel better? No. It makes you feel worse. But in this case, there is so much good on the way, we can't even describe it. And, the less we disconnect from the other side, the more we're going to see it on its way. So the end of the Tisha B'Av, of course, is the birth of the soul of Messiah, which has been born and reborn into humanity generations, millennium after millennium, and that soul will be reborn today, tonight. And that power of rebirth had to emerge from the destruction. There had to be a destruction for a rebirth. And that messianic concept is woven into everything that we see around us. The tree, as if goes to die every year, and it comes back. And so does every species. And so the hope of the entire human race is not just a temple of block and stone and steel and glass and marble and onyx and all these beautiful things. It's the hope that this power of renewal and rebirth will find itself an expression through us. And when we see that, going against God's will will be like a distant memory. If you've really done tshuva, when you really get close and you really have transformed yourself, you can't even remember the person that you were when you did sins. It's gone. It's a new world. And let that world be today. God bless you all. And we'll see you after Tisha B'Av, and we'll celebrate the new world together. All the best.